that warm welcome, and can I start by saying how delighted I am to have been asked to come and speak to your strike rally today, and to start by saying that you are an absolute inspiration to the public sector workers the length and breadth of the UK for what you've done today. People should never forget that going on strike is not easy, that what you've done today is make a stand. You may have bullying bosses in the workplace, you'll be worried about the pay that you've lost, worried about what the future is. You've got over all of that, and you have told the council, but more importantly, the government and everybody else, that you're not prepared to take this lying down, and you're prepared to fight. And you're an inspiration to everyone, and you should be proud of yourself. In PCS, particularly like Unison, we represent some of the lowest paid people in Britain. We represent central government workers, people in job centres, tax offices, driving standards offices. We have 30,000 members on the national minimum wage. We're facing 120,000 job cuts. We're facing privatisation and a tax on our pensions. So we face exactly the same type of problems that you have. And that is why in our union we have already won strike ballots and are about to take strikes in Job Centre Plus, in the Home Office, the Driving Standards Agency, the Equality and Human Rights Commission and HMRC. We are currently balloting over 90,000 PCS members to take strike action. So what I really want to say today is that what you're doing is brilliant and what our members are doing are brilliant, but it is not enough. And we need to do more, and we need to understand why if we don't do more, we will lose. And if you think about losing and how desperate this country will become, in Tower Hamlets, in Camden, in the South Wales valleys and everywhere else, it should make us absolutely inspired and fired up to say we're going to do whatever is necessary. And we should never forget exactly what is at stake. 1.3 million jobs to go in 4 years. Welfare cuts that should make us ashamed that we can treat some of the poorest and most vulnerable people in such a brutal way. Attacks on our pensions, attack on education, not just the privatisation of our schools, but attacks on young people's ability to go into further and higher education. And then of course we've got the pay freeze. These are things that are all happening together, that if we do not stop them, means that we will regret it for years to come. And we have to ask ourselves, why is it being done and how can we stop it? Well, the first thing is let's actually contrast Tower Hamlets with the government who are making the cuts. Now, as I told the brilliant rally at the TUC on Saturday, I had the joy, if you can call it a joy, of meeting the government before Christmas with the leaders of the TUC. We went to Downing Street. And do you know something extraordinary? Every single person, without exception, on the government side of the table was a multi-millionaire. Now let's contrast those multi-millionaires with Tower Hamlets, the most deprived borough in the UK, 25% of children living in poverty, 4,000 kids on EMA, 3,000 people in receipt of housing benefit. Now what I draw from that is the multi-millionaires on the cabinet, they don't use your schools, they don't use your social services, they do not use your hospitals, they live in a bubble of privilege and an elite that only money can buy. But what you use and what you do is provide services. You provide services to the people of Tower Hamlets and to the people of this country we should all care about. So the question we have to ask is if they are doing it, and if we know how awful it's going to be, if they make redundancies in the council, if they close schools, force schools to become academies, force people to move out of the borough because of changes in welfare, rob you of your pensions, we know what that means. Britain becomes a more brutal place overnight. And the only people who can stop it are not Ed Miliband, not the Labour Party who hope to win the general election in 4 years. We haven't got 4 years to wait. We are the only people who can stop it. And we have to ask ourselves, how are we going to stop it? Well, I just want to say 3 things about that because I know time is short. The first thing is we have to be clear about whether you're a Unison member working for the council, an NUT member teaching our kids, or a PCS member working in a job centre, we've all got to be saying something very clear. We have to oppose every single cut in public spending. We have to say that there can't be any cuts. Now, when I said that first to the TUC General Council, some people looked at me and one person called me a fundamentalist and said that's not realistic. Well, I think we have to ask ourselves, why do we say it? And the reason is quite simple. Because if you don't oppose every cut, we will end up choosing which cuts they make and which ones they don't. We will end up choosing between home helps and libraries, between swimming pools and sports fields, between teaching and job centres, between who goes to college, who doesn't go to college, which pensioner gets a benefit and which pensioner doesn't. I don't know about you, but I came into the trade union movement as an activist 30 years ago to believe that we should fight for every pensioner, every student, every council worker, every teacher, and everybody else. But there is another reason why we have to oppose all the cuts. Not only because we can't let them divide us, and believe you me, they will divide us. If we don't stand up to this, they'll start saying public sector's got it easy, private sector's got it hard. The council has got it easier than the civil service and they've got it easier than the rest. We've got to say, actually, we all work for desperately low levels of pay, in very stressful circumstances, trying our best to serve the people of this country. And we should be applauded for it, not attacked. But we have to say that if they do make the cuts, not only will your lives become more miserable individually, but the economy will get into a worse place. The cuts will make it worse, not make it better. And that's why, therefore, we've got to believe there's an alternative. And I hope that everybody here is convinced, and if you haven't, read the PCS leaflet that we put on your seat. Because the government tells people that if we don't make the cuts, the country will go down the pan and we'll have to switch the lights off when we leave. It is lies. It is lies that they tell us to make people think resistance is futile because it's got to happen. And how do we know it's lies? Because you can do the economics. Osborne wants to cut £87 billion off public services. That's why you're going to have job losses in your borough, schools will be affected, and council services will be lost. But do you know what? Every single year, the amount of tax that is avoided or evaded or not collected is not 80 billion, it's 123 billion pounds a year. It is tax that is due that they don't collect. Almost all of it avoided by rich people and corporations who exploit tax loopholes to get out of paying their way. And you're absolutely right. Top of the scroungers list. The scroungers they tell us about are not those people on benefits. They're not the people struggling to make ends meet. They're Sir Philip Green from Topshop. Because you know, something about Philip Green that is absolutely extraordinary, right? This man has got so much money, he doesn't know what to do with it. But let me tell you something about him. In one tax manoeuvre, by investing his personal dividend of £1.3 billion in Monaco in the name of his wife, he avoided paying tax in this country of £243 million. One transaction. What would 10% of that 240 million do in Tower Hamlets? What could your services do? The youth clubs, the home health services, the NHS education. It would seem like it was Christmas if you had that money. That's one rich person avoided paying his way. And when we raise it with the government, is it any surprise they ignore us when the government are multi-millionaires themselves, many of whom are also operating under dodgy tax scams? And he explains why when I met Norman Tebbit to do a debate, remember Norman Tebbit? Norman Tebbit said to me when I raised this, "You're a silly young man. It has always been acceptable that people can arrange their tax affairs to benefit themselves." Well, it's not alright for you. You all pay as you go. You get no choice in your tax, it's taken out your wages. But when you're rich, you can avoid paying your way. And if these people put their hand in the pocket, we would need no cuts whatsoever, so there is an alternative. But my last point is this. John's right, I've known John a long time. I started work in the civil service in a benefit office when I was 16. Neither of us had grey hair then, John, when I knew you all 10 years ago. But we started work a long time ago. And the one thing I can tell you is I'm an optimist. I always was brought up to always believe that we should always hope that things can be better. But optimism is not enough in this case. Because I tell you what, the strength of our argument, even though it's compelling, is not going to force Cameron, Clegg or Osborne to change direction. They will try to ride this out. They will ignore the demonstration on Saturday. They will look the other way because of your strike. They will think that if they keep their heads down, they'll get away with it. And the only thing that will stop that is if we can force them. We force them to say, we're not going to accept it. Now, if we're going to force them, we have to ask ourselves how to do it. Now, let's be clear. There are still 6.5 million trade union members in Britain. The bulk of those are in the public sector. Every single person in this room today already should know, and if you don't know, I'll tell you, that the government's already decided they are raiding your pension pot. They're going to make you pay more, work longer, and get less. They've already said it to all of us. Isn't it obvious, therefore, that whether you're in PCS, the NUT, Unison, or the GMB, that our answer should be, we're going to go on strike together to stop you. We're actually going to go on strike together. You know, it's not rocket science, is it? If they're attacking us all at the same time, why don't we make sure we stand together at the same time? You know, my father told me when I was young, and teachers would probably say this is the wrong thing, but he told me, if you get into a fight in school, son, he said, if you get into a fight in school, this was the 70s, if you get into a fight in school, make sure you've got loads of people on your side. Very good advice, it seems to me. If you're going to get into a fight with the government, why would we want Unison to fight on their own? Or the NUT to fight on their own? Or PCS? We should all be in it together. It's obvious. And if we do it, we can win. My last point is this. I'm happy to say today that PCS is already in discussions with the NUT, UCU, at least, to plan now for a joint strike ballot that will see us have close on 1 million people, if members vote for it, on strike before the summer. Now, my appeal to every other public sector union is it shouldn't just be PCS and the NUT and the UCU. It should be all of us. Because if it's all of us, it will give them more to think about than anything else. Imagine what it could be like. And therefore, the time has come for us to be inspired by what we see in Tower Hamlets. And if we've got the NUT and Unison in Tower Hamlets, I want to see the NUT, Unison and PCS and everybody else in every town and every city, the length and breadth of the UK. And I'll leave you with this thought, right? My father said, another thing he said to me, because he talked a lot, he said to me when I was young, the old phrase, right? And the old phrase, he said, goes like this. He said, son, when you fight for things in life, you're not guaranteed to win. And he was right. You're never guaranteed to win. If I stood here now and said, you go on strike, I promise you, you will win, I would be a fool. You can never promise to win. But the saying goes on, that when you never fight at all, you lose every single time. Now you are fighting. Your fight is brilliant. But we want this fight everywhere. Because this is our kids' futures. It is our pensioners, our health service, our council services, our youth services, our home care. It is our job centres, it is our welfare state. These rich kids are robbing us of what we fought for years. They want us to suffer while they count their millions every night. The only people who can stop them is us. You've inspired me, I hope you've inspired yourselves. Now let's all do it together in all parts of the country, and then we can win.
and our job. I think the bureaucracies need to take heed, because I think that people are speaking and we need to make sure we demand our leaders listen.